My dear child, if I were to ask you, what is the most difficult part about telling a story? When you started to put that story away, what did you think was going to be most difficult for you? And the child said, I thought, what if I forget my story? Sometimes I get stuck. I start telling a story, but then I don't know what's happened next. So I might get stuck and then people may laugh at me. Ah, said the storyteller, that's what most people face. We're not sure if we can take the story towards its end without getting stuck somewhere in between. But I tell you why that happens. It's because we tend to remember stories as lines, as a text which we need to memorize. Now that's a problem, because once we start to memorize a story line by line and learn it by heart, by rote, then the chances are that we might get stuck somewhere. But the better way to learn a story, to tell a story, is to use story maps. And today I'm going to talk to you about story maps. See, story maps are these pictures of various scenes in the story. You remember when we talked about the plot of the story, how the story happens. We said there are so many events in the story. In the Three Little Pigs story, there are at least 4 major events. One is the event where the mama pig sends them off. 2 is when they build their houses. 3 is when the big bad wolf comes knocking and blows their houses away. And 4 is when he steps onto the chimney and falls into the fire. 4 events. Now, if we had a clear picture of these 4 events, as the story is being told, if we are able to build this as a clear picture in our mind, at least these 4 images of these 4 important things that are happening in the story. Imagine if you close your eyes and you're able to see this happening. You can see exactly what's happening in that scene. It's like in a movie. You watch it in your mind's eye. You create this image for yourself. It can be different for everyone, that's okay. But in your mind, you have an image of what's happening at that point in time. And I'm going to show you some pictures here which will help you understand one way of picturing it. Okay, so there's a picture of the mama pig and the little pigs. There's a picture of they're building their house, of the wolf coming and knocking, and finally the wolf standing on the chimney. With these images in mind, not exactly these ones, but the ones that are in your mind for any story, you can then start to describe what's happening in that picture. So you have the picture in your mind and then you start describing the picture, and there your story has taken shape. You do not have to memorize it line by line. That creates a lot of tension of trying to recall exactly the correct sentence. We don't need to do that. We can speak from recalling these pictures of a story map. And each story map would probably have a few sentences that need to be recalled. So there might be a few sentences that make it easier for you to tell the story. Like when the wolf comes and speaks to the little pigs, there is this, let me come in. And the piglet says, no, not by the hairs of my chinny chin chin. The wolf says, I will huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in. Those are constant. And those increase the listener's interest because you're repeating it and they already know what to expect. And you say it in a particular way. That builds interest. So you have those lines which you still probably have to put to your memory, commit to your memory. But the major events, what flows from one to the next, is something that you have stored as images which you can easily recall. It's the case with any movie or book that you've read. You see, the good story that you remember even today now is not the words of the story. It's the images that it is left with you in your mind. And it's the emotion, the feeling that you have towards that story. Okay, so let's try and work on those. As soon as you can get those images in your mind using story maps, you are set to tell your story. without a hitch. Trust me.